Hi everybody from Old St. Patrick's Church in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's the home parish of my guest today on Fields and Faith, the home parish too of his family, his wife Molly, and their 6 children. My guest has been a football coach for most of his adult life, and you could almost say he was born to be a football coach because his grandfather, many believe, was the greatest NFL coach in history. When my guest is not on the football field, he is a popular speaker on the Catholic speaking circuit. His name is Joe Lombardi. He's the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. I'm Bob Dolan, and this is Fields and Faith.
The city of Detroit, Michigan has seen more than its share of problems in recent years, but it's always been and still is one of America's most passionate sports towns. One of the great heavyweight champions of all time, Joe Louis, was raised in Detroit, and he's honored with this sculpture in downtown Detroit. The Red Wings have won 11 Stanley Cups. The Tigers are one of the better teams always in baseball, and right next door to where the Tigers play is Ford Field. It's the home of the Detroit Lions of the National Football League, a playoff team in the season just completed. And it's here where Joe Lombardi works as offensive coordinator for the Lions. I spoke with Joe about football inside his home parish of Old St. Patrick's in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Joe Lombardi, thank you for being with us today on Fields and Faith. I appreciate you being a guest.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm going to start somewhere that may surprise you. We'll talk about Vince later on. We'll talk about our great Catholic faith later on and the Lions. I want to start by thanking you for your service. I'm not sure a lot of people know that you attended Air Force.
Yep.
And that you served. So thank you very much for your service, first of all, to our country. Where did you serve? When did you serve?
I graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1994 and got stationed just south of here in Dayton, Ohio at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And it's kind of in a white-collar type military service. I worked on the F-22 program when it was still in development. So that was the majority of my service.
Did you consider other military schools? Or was it always there? You did?
No, I was getting recruited for football and really went down to the last minute whether I was going to go to Navy or Air Force.
Really?
Yeah.
My dad was a Navy man.
Sure.
Yeah. And you played football?
Yes.
At Air Force?
Yes.
Tight end?
Yes.
And you also played lacrosse.
My senior year, that's
now,
right.
Now lacrosse is big today.
It's getting bigger, yeah.
But back in your day, was it just sort of becoming popular?
Yeah, we had, when I was younger, we had lived in New York, where it was pretty big even back then.
Yeah, it's big out east, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my brothers had started playing it, or my one brother had started playing it, so I'd kind of picked it up. We moved to Seattle where it was just kind of a club sport thing, and I played a little bit in high school, and then went off to college and was all focused on football. And then it wasn't until my senior year when football was over that I was kind of looking around. I was like, well, I don't want to have to sit through all these inspections every week like all the non-athletes do, so I got to go do something. I'm a little bit joking there, but I went out for lacrosse and ended up making the team as a senior. And my stick skills had eroded. I wasn't very good, but they let me run out there and play defense.
Yeah.
So
I watch. I really have no idea what I'm watching, but it's a fun sport to watch.
It's fun. It's fast and physical, and it's fun.
Let's talk about the Lions. You just completed your first year as offensive coordinator for the Lions after, 7 or 8 with the Saints?
7 years with the Saints.
Was it?
Yeah.
So you come up here to Detroit, running the offense, 11 wins, playoffs, lose to Dallas on a call or two that probably should not have happened.
Yeah, there was some controversy.
So when you look back, 11 wins, you make the playoffs, that's good, but that's a nice step for the Lions.
Yeah.
But you lose in a tough way. So when you look back, good season, disappointing season?
Well, I think it's good. I think the 11 wins was good. It was a big improvement over the last couple of years here. It was good to make the playoffs. Certainly wish we would have won that game and see what would have happened if we could have gone on. Offensively, it wasn't quite as productive as we were hoping. We had a lot of injuries and things we were dealing with, but I think we laid a good foundation. The head coach really does a great job with the team as far as the head coach has got a lot of character, and he's been teaching a lot of those lessons to the guys, and they've really embraced it. So I think we've got a good foundation to move forward.
When you come in, Joe, whether it was early on with the Saints or now with the Lions, do you bring your philosophy, your offensive philosophy, and hope that the players adjust to you, or vice versa? Do you look at what you have and say, I've got to tweak this and this about my philosophy?
Sure.
How does it fit?
Well, I think you have a starting point. You kind of have a system that you're building from, but I think all good coaches look at the players, look at the resources that they have, and try to use those players to maximize their effectiveness. So every year, your team's got different personnel, and so I think you've got to look. If you've got Calvin Johnson, who we have, who's probably the best receiver in the NFL, maybe NFL history, he can do certain things that if you don't have him, you can no longer do. So you certainly have to engineer your offense around the personnel you have. Every quarterback's different, every offensive line's different. So you have a starting point, you kind of your basic philosophy.
Sure.
But then you meld it around the players that you have.
So the game plan from week to week, I'm just a fan, I watch every week, and every week I hear about what's the game plan going to be?
Yeah.
And I know it depends a lot on who you're playing, I get that, but there's not a lot of tweaking in a game plan from week to week, is there? Sure, an adjustment here or there,
yeah.
But your philosophy's the same.
Your philosophy's the same, and you're not going to add a ton new concepts, totally new routes that a quarterback's got to read through, or brand new blocking scheme. You may have one or two, but not a ton of them.
Yeah.
Really what changes is the personnel for that concept, the formation that you're launching that play out of. Those things change because there's so much scouting that goes on. These players are getting so smart. The video that they have access to, the reports they have access to. It was one of the big regrets I have about our playoff game. I ran a third down play out of a formation that was kind of unique. They knew exactly what was coming because we had run it a few games before. It was a mistake that we made as coaches, and so you'd certainly have to mix things up so it looks different to the defense, but maybe doesn't feel a whole lot different to the offense.
Do you ever have a player, whether with the Saints or the Lions, in your prep for the week, they say, Coach, I don't think this play's going to work?
Oh, sure.
Do you?
Oh,
and
yeah.
do you listen?
Yeah,
you do?
Absolutely. Especially.
So the players have a voice in a game plan?
Yes, yeah. And a lot of it depends on who it's coming from.
Okay, yeah.
If the quarterback's not comfortable with it,
yeah.
certainly you need to take that into account.
Yeah.
If your receiver is saying, hey, I'm not getting the ball this play, so I don't like it, then, you think about it a little bit.
Right,
maybe
right.
you don't listen to him as much.
Is it hard to keep everybody happy?
Oh, yeah.
It
Especially
is.
When you've got a lot of players that are used to getting the ball a lot and are good at it.
Sure.
Sometimes you can have an embarrassment of riches where, there's just not enough plays to go around for all the players that you have. So
yeah.
there's usually someone who's a little grumpy about the looks they got.
Well, you brought up Calvin Johnson already. You got a guy like him. Obviously, he's going to be targeted a lot.
Yeah, you're going to run the offense.
Yeah. So would you ever, and you don't have to mention names, but would you ever hear from the other receivers and say, hey, Coach, I'm kind of out of here too?
Yeah. No,
you do? Or do they get it? Hey, we're playing with this guy. So.
Every player's different, and I've been lucky to be around receivers that have had good character and been team players.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you can sense it in their body language, and they don't mean it. It's just natural.
Sure,
that guys want,
sure.
They want to contribute. They want to be part of it. They want to get the ball. Calvin got hurt for a number of games this year, and he was severely limited in a couple more. And so, really, our leading receiver this year was Golden Tate. He had 99 catches to Calvin's 70 or 72, something like that. So, we were able to spread it to those two a bunch, and then there's other guys that that have to know their role. I think one of the most important qualities a player can have is to know who he is and understand his role on a team. And I think that's true with any team setting. And if there's a guy that says, hey, I deserve this, but he really doesn't, you've got a problem. And so if there are guys that understand that, hey, I know I'm going to be third in the progression. I know I'm going to get the ball once or twice a game, if even, but I got to block my tail off. I got to play special teams. Know your role. Then those guys end up having a longer career and end up being more successful in the NFL.
You currently work, Joe, with Matthew Stafford. You've coached Drew Brees. Every year you see Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Every other year or so you see Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady or an Andrew Luck or whoever. Is there one thing that the really good quarterbacks have in common?
Yeah, I think It's more the mentality, and there's all kinds of physical differences between these guys. Some guys have stronger arms than others, some are more mobile. But I think there's just a mental toughness, an ability to handle adversity. We were talking before the interview started about Russell Wilson in this championship game against the Packers, and he had 3 quarters that were just awful. And a lot of guys would have just folded and given up, and he never did. And I like our quarterback here in Detroit. This guy is as tough a guy as I've ever been around, physically and mentally. And I think that you have to start with that. If you don't have that mental toughness, and in this league, physical toughness, you're going to have trouble. If you got everything else, it's going to be trouble. You're going to have trouble sticking to it.
Is that something you can coach, or at least you can help with?
I think you can.
Or is that just there or not?
I think you can manage a little bit, but I think these guys just have it.
Mm-hmm. How do you handle, and you or most any other assistant coach in football, and I ask this with great respect for what you do, but as a fan sitting at home watching games, coaching guys that have far more talent than you ever had, far more skill than you ever had, far more achievements. In the heat of a moment, practice or a game, and they do something they shouldn't have done, they come off the field, and now you're going to step up and coach.
Yeah.
I would think a lot of them are thinking to themselves, what have you ever done?
Yeah.
Show me your record.
Sure.
Show me your resume.
Yeah.
I'm better than you ever were. How do you guard against that?
I think that almost all players are listening to someone if they think that you can help them. These guys are high achievement guys. They want to do well. And certainly there's pride involved. And in the heat of the moment, that pride can get the better of people. But I think if you have set up a foundation where they know that you know what you're talking about, you know the offense, and you can help them perform better, these guys are all ears.
Shall we talk about Grandpa?
Sure.
Vince Lombardi. First of all, do today's guys know?
Yeah,
I mean, they weren't alive.
No,
when Vince
certainly
was coaching.
certainly the trophy is the Vince Lombardi trophy.
But did they make the connection? You walk into a room, did they say, there's Vince's grandson?
Well, I think just the way the media is, by the time that you've walked into the room,
so they've
read a couple newspaper articles by that point.
Do they ask him about you, or ask you about him? They
not
don't.
Much.
No?
He died before I was born, for one, so I didn't know him. But no, I think it's far enough removed that there's not that huge curiosity factor. I mean, they kind of know who he was and what he did, but very limited.
He passed about a year before you were born?
That's right.
However, obviously, he had an impact on your life.
Sure.
How so?
Well, I think one, because of him, I think my dad got into football when I was at a young age. I think when you grow up around the game, it can kind of get in your DNA a little bit, and it's hard to walk away. So I grew up around football, and really, when I went off to the Air Force Academy, I had no intention of coaching. But when I got out, and I was done playing football, and I was in the Air Force, I remember sitting around with my roommates. That first fall came around where I was not involved with football, and it just felt like something was missing. And so that's when I started thinking maybe I should get back into it as a coach. And so I just think growing up around it, it becomes a part of you and it's hard to walk away. So it's probably one reason why I'm a football coach. But the thing that I admired most about him was his deep faith. He was a very devout Catholic, went to Mass every day, and in season and out of season, which to me is remarkable. There's no way I can imagine making it to Mass every day during the season.
Sure, yeah.
And Bart Starr would say if you ever heard him at practice and the language he used, you understood why he had to go to church every day. But he was very, he was, and a lot of people don't know, in high school he was studying to be a priest, and decided, I think his senior year, that he was going to go a different direction. But his Catholic faith was very important to him, and that certainly had a good effect on me.
And when he passed, he was buried out of St. Patrick's Cathedral.
That's right.
In New York City.
Yep.
Standing room only. Yeah. So he passed the faith on, obviously, to his children.
Sure.
And then through them to you and the others. How many are you in the family?
I'm the youngest of 4.
Okay. And Vince had how many children?
He had 2. I think there were, either a couple miscarriages and maybe even a child that died in infancy, but 2 that survived.
So if your name, Joe, was not Lombardi, would you be coaching football?
I would probably guess no.
Really?
Yeah, just because I think as I left football, maybe it wouldn't have been so ingrained in me that it was. I mean, from the time my dad started working for the Seahawks when I was 4 years old. So
your dad's name?
Vince. He was
Vince Jr. Okay.
Yeah, and And so every fall, either a team my dad was working for or a team I was playing for, I mean, it was the biggest thing of my life was how's the team doing? And when all of a sudden that was no longer a part of it, it just felt like there was something missing. So I just think growing up around it, being influenced by it in that environment so consistently that it was hard to walk away.
Just one more question about Vince, then we'll move on to our faith. With the Lions, you play a game a year in Green Bay.
That's right.
So when you drive to the game, you're driving on Lombardi Avenue.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the game, when you get to Lambeau, there's a statue of Vince outside. And then when you get inside, you look up at the Ring of Honor and there's Vince's name. Does it impact you? Or are you used to it by now?
I think you become used to it a little bit. You know, you grow up and it's always been that he's been my grandfather. Now certainly going to Lambeau Field's a little bit different, but during the season, on game day, I think you were so focused on, hey, what plays are we going to run? How are we going to win this game? You know, you're so focused on the task at hand that, you know, those things don't really enter into your psyche a whole bunch. You know, you might pay it a little bit of quick recognition, but then it's on to the task at hand.
Didn't the guys say, hey, Joe,
no.
Look, there's your grandpa. They don't, no.
It's never really come up.
You just mentioned something that struck me. And in no way do I mean to compare the fact that I have a brother who a lot of people know, Cardinal Dolan, with your situation. I'm not going there. But you just said, he's my grandpa. When people ask me about Cardinal Dolan, I say, he's my brother.
Sure.
So do you look at Vince Lombardi as the greatest coach in football history, or he was just my grandpa? You know, which way do you?
Probably more the first, because I never knew him. You know, I don't have those personal memories of, you know, throwing the football in the backyard with him or anything like that. So, you know, I think maybe one reason why it hasn't been a huge deal for me or a huge burden or a huge, you know, issue having Vince Lombardi as my grandfather is because to me he's a lot like he is for everyone else. He's kind of that figure on the TV and NFL films or, you know, NFL classics. So certainly I've got a little more insight hearing stories from my dad and you pay a little bit more attention because you know it's part of your family. But
with the Saints, you got to hold the Lombardi Trophy.
Yeah,
that must have been pretty cool.
It was. It was a good moment. But again, it was kind of a little bit of the significance of it, if you will, was a little bit lost on me because it was, let's win this game, then you won, and you'd worked so hard, and it was over, and it was just kind of a relief, like, hey, they can't make me work this week, I'm off.
Sure,
so, so maybe you didn't appreciate it as much as you do now looking back on it.
Coming up next on Fields and Faith, Joe Lombardi talks about the important role his Catholic faith plays in his life and in the life of his family. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Fields and Faith. Joe Lombardi, offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, and his family attend Old St. Patrick's Church in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It is the oldest English-speaking church in the state. It's just like the old days, the altar's at the back, with the priest not facing the congregation. Also just like the old days, Holy Communion is received at the communion rail. This is a vibrant and devout Catholic community. The pastor, Father Gerald Goronsky, is the team chaplain for the Detroit Lions. And it's inside this beautiful church where, after a recent weekday morning mass, I continued my conversation with Joe Lombardi, this time not about football, but about his Catholic faith.
Let's talk, Joe, about the role that your Catholic faith plays in your life. We're sitting inside of Old St. Patrick's Church in Ann Arbor, Michigan, your parish.
Yes.
It's a beautiful old church. We were talking a bit beforehand that we both have a great fondness for old churches. For you, how come? Why the older the better?
I just think it has I think there's a beauty to it. And it just kind of, it helps me get in the frame of mind that I want to be in for Mass. You know, if what we believe is happening at Mass, it just helps me focus on that a little bit better.
I love communion rails. You don't see those in use very often anymore.
No.
Or the priest with his back to the congregation. I don't see that either. The older the church for me, it just, I don't know, it almost seems more real, more genuine. Certainly the congregation seems more devout.
Yes.
How did you find Old St. Pat's? You've only been in the area for, what, a year or so?
That's
How'd
right.
you end up here?
As we were moving up here, my wife called a local order of nuns that we were familiar, and for some reason the name of them is slipping my mind right now, but she kind of told them what we were looking for, and they recommended this parish.
You spend a lot of your time on public speaking to Catholic groups. In fact, that's where we first met. We met a couple of years ago at a Men of Christ conference in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and you were one of the featured speakers in front of about 2,300 men. And you spoke for about 50 minutes. And if I recall, you drew some correlation between preparing for a football game and living our faith life. Correct? Is that kind of your blueprint for your? Can you bullet point it for us? What do you tell groups?
I think in Wisconsin, I talked about some of the qualities you're looking for from a football player, and compared them to how that can relate to us as Catholics. And so you're looking for dedication, you're looking for commitment, you're looking for mental resiliency, like we talked about with quarterbacks. You're looking for people to take it seriously and to believe in what they're doing. And, all those things. The reason that I kind of go that direction is I remember someone asked me once how being a Catholic helps me be a better football coach. Mm-hmm. And I had trouble answering that question. And I thought, on reflecting on it, I thought maybe the question was reversed. How does being a football coach help me be a better Catholic? Because I think something my grandfather told his team, you should have three things in your life: your faith, your family, and he said the Green Bay Packers. For me, it's the Detroit Lions, and I hope he's not rolling over in his grave. But, and so, your faith should come first. And so, the speech came from, hey, what kind of qualities do we look for from players or even from coaches that help you be the best you can be at your job? Shouldn't we apply those things to being the best we can at our faith?
Can you talk faith, Joe, in an NFL locker room?
Oh, yeah.
You can?
Yeah, no,
right.
It's mostly... the demographics of the NFL are such that there's not a ton of Catholics in the NFL, but there's a strong, Christian presence in most, at least the locker rooms that I've been a part of. Mm-hmm. I remember one of our backup quarterbacks in New Orleans for a couple of years was Mark Brunell, and he was a very strong, devout, evangelical Christian, and we would get in a couple theological discussions every now and then, so certainly those things come up.
You've recruited your friend here, the pastor here at the church, to be the chaplain, correct, for
That's
the
right.
Lions. So during the season, is there a Saturday night mass for the Catholics on the team, and including yourself? How does that work during the season? Because my gosh, you're every hour spoken for.
Every hour spoken for. Yeah. On Saturday evenings, there's a position meeting, and then there's an offensive meeting, and then there's a team meeting. It's just kind of and the position meeting is only for quarterbacks. But anyway. Right before that meeting, there's a Catholic Mass in one of the hotel meeting rooms, and then there's a Protestant chapel. They kind of go side by side. Mm-hmm. They're a half hour, and then you walk out of those, and everyone goes to their meetings. So certainly, like I said, the demographics are such. The Protestant chapel's a little more well attended, but we've got our group that shows up every week. So.
But people throughout the NFL are well aware of your devotion to the Catholic faith. I mean, would people ever just out of the blue, hey Joe, let's talk Christ, let's talk faith?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it's you kind of know who all the Catholics are coaching wise, because at the NFL Combine there's a mass that you kind of look around, you see, there's all the Catholic coaches here. But I think if anyone sees this TV show, or if they read some of the articles that have been written, they'd know. But I don't know how aware everyone else is.
What are you're a father of 6,
yes,
and happily married for what, 20 years or so?
15 now.
15. Okay. What are the main challenges faced by a husband today and a father today to be a good and faithful husband, a great father, and yet a devout Catholic? How hard is that today as maybe when you first got married?
Well, I think for me it's become easier only because my faith has become clearer. I think I understand a little bit more of what being Catholic is all about. I understand a little bit more what our faith teaches, and I think that's a great support in doing those things. But we don't live in a world that's friendly to being a devout Catholic and a father of 6. I mean, it's just, there's not a lot of support coming outside the church for those kind of things. Certainly my profession is one that requires a lot of time. That's probably my biggest challenge, especially during the season, is I'm away from my family a lot. I'm getting home often during the week after all the kids are in bed. And so, for a good portion of the year, I feel like an absentee father. So that's been my biggest challenge is juggling the football, the coaching, and the requirements of that with being a father of a big family with young kids.
Is there one thing, Joe, that you love about our Catholic faith? I mean, what is it about our faith that you just say, now this is really cool?
I think the consistency of it, you know, that what the church taught 2,000 years ago teaches today. And there's a lot of comfort in that for me. As you know, the world is full of a lot of messages, and it's hard to kind of figure out what the truth is in certain things. And when you see an institution that has kept consistent for 2,000 years on faith and morals, I think it's hard for just an institution that's purely man-made to do that. I'd say it's darn near impossible for it to exist and be consistent for 2,000 years. So that certainly gives me a lot of faith that there's more than just human beings behind it.
I wonder if you're like me when people ask what's it mean for you to be Catholic. I never know what to say either. We all struggle with that, but I recently said I can't imagine my life without being Catholic. I mean, it's just a part of who we are.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. Joe, you've been a real joy, and I greatly appreciate your time and your hospitality and your cooperation. So thank you very much, and God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
My great thanks to Joe Lombardi and to the staff at Old St. Patrick's Church in Ann Arbor for their hospitality. Please join me again next week with another guest from the world of sports. This is Fields and Faith, and I'm Bob Dolan.